Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, good evening. On behalf of His Excellency Dr. Jamal Zayed, the Director General of the Emirates Center for Strategic Studies and Research, it gives me the pleasure to welcome you all in this lecture and entitled Iran between Ahmadinejad and Rouhani. Ladies and gentlemen, the coming of Hassan Rouhani and his way of dealing with the nuclear program and the flexibility shown in their own talks with the Western powers and the visits paid by the foreign minister and their own statements about their relations with the Gulf nations raised many questions regarding the foreign policy of the Iranian government and what are the factors influencing this policy and what are the parties influential on this policy. To respond to these questions, it gives me the pleasure on your behalf to welcome Dr. Sultan Mohammed Al-Naeimi, who will present a lecture on Iran between Ahmadinejad and Rouhani. Dr. Sultan is a faculty member of the Abu Dhabi University and a PhD holder from Ain Shams University. His master's thesis was entitled The Political Currents in Iran from 1979 to the year 2000, and the title of his PhD dissertation was The Iranian Political Thought, Analytical Study in the Light of the Persian Sources. Dr. Sultan Al-Naeimi participated in different forums and as a lecturer at the Al-Ittihad Forum, presenting a research paper on the dangers of religious, sectarian and ethnic dimensions on national cohesion, and he has contributed by a number of articles to Al-Ittihad and Al-Sharq Al-Awsat dailies, and he's also an expert on Iranian affairs at Sky News Arabia channel. The Emirates Center issued a book by Mr. Naeimi entitled Iranian Political Thought, Roots, Tributaries and Pacts. Now it gives me the pleasure to invite Dr. Sultan Naeimi to give his lecture entitled Iran between Ahmadinejad and Rouhani. The floor is yours, Dr. Sultan Naeimi. You will have 30 minutes. Or more? You would like more? Okay, thank you. In the name of Allah, the Merciful, the Compassionate, first of all, I'd like to extend my gratitude to the Emirates Center for Strategic Studies and Research, represented by Dr. Jamal Zayed, for giving me this opportunity, and also I welcome to you all for attending this lecture, in which we'll try to deal with some aspects. We'll go first of all deal with the system, the political system in Iran, so that we might get a kind of an image of read the outputs of the Iranian regime, and also to talk about the dimensions of the recent deal between Iran with 5+1 powers, and then we'll talk about the new openness between the Gulf nations and Iran, and we will conclude with the US-Iranian relations. No doubt this lecture will deal with different questions. Why did Iran start a kind of proximity and closeness with the West? Why is this openness in their own foreign policy? I put it on purpose to put the image of both the former president and the current president in this way, because many people find that the change that took place in Iran was a result of this smile that appears on Rouhani's face, while the recent or the last difficult 8 years were when Mr. Najad was president were the reason behind the failure of Iran to be more flexible and more openness. But the question here, is it really true that the president of the country of or the Republic of Iran is capable of having such powers within the regime itself? Is he or capable of doing something in the foreign affairs or foreign relations? The other question is, who rules Iran? Is it the murshid or the political, the religious guide? Does the president have certain powers to influence foreign policies? The easy answer that we usually hear is that the wali al-faqih, or the clergy faqih or leader, is the only one who has all powers in his hands, while others see that the president has powers to practice as per the constitution, since the president is the second personality in the the country or the political regime. Those who say that the murshid or the guide will have, Hassan Rouhani says that if the matter is like that, why did we find a kind of discrepancies in the policies between Mr. Khatami and Rafsanjani and Ahmadinejad? In fact, this is something logical and reasonable, because this gives us the suggestion that the president has some powers in order to influence a kind of a change. It's not in the murshid's hands always in order to know and to move or to navigate into the system itself in Iran. To have an idea about it, we will talk about the pivotal attitude of the faqih or the clergy guide, but let's take some examples that might make us understand. Let's talk about the experts council or khubara, majlis khubara, which consists of 86 faqih or clergy people, whose power is to select the faqih or the guidance, and this wali faqih or the guiding murshid can be also deposed if he fails to do his duties. The question is it a discovery or is it a selection? Not to go into the details, but what happens in Iran now is that the wali al-faqih has been selected by the heavenly powers, and the role of the council here is to discover this wali or this clergyman or this guide among the different guides or different clerics. He has, for example, the power to appoint directly, for example, the constitutional council. The wali al-faqih also has the direct power to appoint 6 members of the Constitution Maintenance or Protection Council, and he has the power also to appoint the Chief Justice, who will have also the right to choose 6 members of the Constitutional Council. And this means that the Constitutional Council is directly appointed by the murshid or the guide. Why do we talk about this council? What gives this significance? It is the first wall or firewall of the political system of this regime, and it is called the Nazarati Istiswabi, that is the corrective supervision or surveillance before and during and after the elections. And this council has the powers over the elections. The irony here is that the experts council, who has the power to observe the faqih or the must go to the faqih or must go, whose names must go to the Constitutional Council, who will divide or decide the powers or to reject the powers. And therefore the council, as we have seen, has been appointed by the wali or the guide. Now we go to the elections in Iran. I'm not now. Is it really an election? Is there a real elections? Yes, we can say yes. There is also. We can say there is an election pushing the people to go to the ballot stations and to take part in the elections. But the image that comes and gives you a kind of an irony or a kind of a paradox, even after selecting or electing the president cannot be considered as legitimate until he goes to the wali al-faqih or the clerical guide so that he could legitimize his presidency. And therefore the guide or the clerical guide will receive from the president and the former president, and he gives it over to the new president-elect, and he says, it was I who appointed you due to the authority that I enjoy. And if that doesn't happen, all the electoral system and the participation of the people shall not be considered as a power to consider the president as legitimate. If we go back again, who rules Iran? After showing you this system, we can say no doubt it is the wali al-faqih or the cleric guide, because the cleric has all the powers, and even the constitution derives its own legitimacy from the faqih or the wali al-faqih. And then Hassan Rouhani says that I have absolute powers to negotiate with the 5+1 on the nuclear program. And then we have to come back to ask the question, is it really that the murshid or the guide has this absolute power, or the president? Yes, they say the faqih has every power in his hand, but there might be correct if we say that the president has his own powers. But if we come or have a kind of a close-up on the Iranian system, we can see here this galaxy, and let's see the Iranian regime as a galaxy here, and we see that the murshid or the guide is in the epicenter of this galaxy, and there are other orbits around the murshid, and coming closer to the murshid gives them more significance in their own system. And what are these institutions? For example, the Maktab al-Murshid, that is the Supreme National Council of Security Council, and also the Revolutionary Guard and other things. But they say that the president is far away from the orbit, but we say that he is the second personality according to the constitution. However, the president's relationship or close relationship with the murshid decides his own powers. In fact, to prove this, Ahmadinejad in 2005 and 2009 was completely different due to the fact that his close relationship was different with the murshid. What happens next? I'm talking about the Iranian system itself in reading the internal situation, and then it goes out to the regional situation, and then to the global or international situation. All these institutions read or extrapolate the situation. So what happens within this system is to study the internal situation, the regional situation, international situation, and then they the important institutions such as the Murshid office and the official or the Revolutionary Guard try to understand this situation, as if they are the decision makers, in fact, and then the final decision comes from the Murshid himself. It's not all details come from the Murshid or the guide, but the strategic studies, strategic policies are always in the hands of the Murshid, and therefore we can say everything is in his hands. But we cannot say it completely, because we don't understand Iran very well if we say that to prove this fact, sometimes that the Murshid himself gives his directives to the executive powers. We see sometimes that the Revolutionary Guard contradicts him or sometimes attacks the government of Iran. Therefore, it is an integrated system and should be read in the right way so that we can understand the outputs of this regime. Now we move to the new nuclear deal. How did the Iranian regime read the situation? Was this agreement the result of Rouhani's policy, or was it the failure of Mr. Ahmadinejad? Let's make a kind of a comparison between the two men in understanding the internal or national, regional and international affairs. When we talk about the internal situation, very severe sanctions that raised the levels of unemployment in Iran to 19%, and the inflation rose to almost 50%, and Iran had been moving or living under severe sanctions. And during the last years of Ahmadinejad, oil and gas, petrochemicals and money transfers and automobile sector were very passing through very difficult situation, and therefore there is no that big difference between the two eras, in fact, because the sanctions appeared in at the very beginning of Ahmadinejad, and they are still going on, and Rouhani's era is an extension of these sanctions and the difficulties experienced by the Iranian people. If we move to the regional situation, Iran started to view the Arab Spring revolutions as Islamic revolutions, deriving their own existence from the Iranian Revolution, and therefore they started to employ it for more footholds and to enhance their own relations with the Arab Spring countries, and the political Islam started to appear very strongly in this era. However, Iran started to lose something important here, that is, it has lost its own relation with Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic movement, as one of the important pivots of Islamic resistance. And this discrepancy between Hamas and Iran led Hamas to be away from the movement, or the Islamic movement, or the Islamic resistance movement. And then with the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and other places, Hamas came back, but not in that clear picture, to the Islamic movement. And the recent statement of Mahmoud Zahar saying that the relations between Hamas and Iran have been resumed, saying that we have not cut off our own relations. If we talk about the regional situation, whether during Ahmadinejad's or Hassan Rouhani's reign, we do not find any change. In fact, they are similar in their attitude, so that we could not say that due to the result that Hassan Rouhani changed his own attitude because of these situations, because there is no change. If we move to the international situation, we cannot move away from Syria, of course, and the most important thing that we can understand from this attitude is that the Western powers and other nations found that Hassan Rouhani enjoys or has a specific discourse that would encourage others to resume their own relations, and the failure of the United States in Iran and Iraq, and the situation in Syria and the situation in Libya, and the successes that the Iranian regime and the Syrian regimes thought that they made on the ground of battles, and also the participation, involvement of some militias and the Hezbollah, the appearance of Daesh, I mean the Islamic State of Iraq and Bilad al-Sham in Syria. All of them will have their own influence on the Syrian battlefields, and this will reiterate the situation in Libya, and therefore the Iranian regime found that they have the upper hand in facing the other countries or other powers supporting the Syrian revolution. And therefore we found that the Rouhani's era and Najadi's era were not completely different, but Rouhani's discourse, in fact, was characterized by being positive and encouraged the West to be more flexible in dealing with Iran. And now if we compare between in the balance of the three situations, the internal, the regional and the international, we found that there was not that big difference. So if there is any kind of a difference, and if Iran seeks to reach a kind of reconciliation with the West, it could have been done with Najad and not to wait until Rouhani comes to power. The question here, it could be said that Ahmadinejad was opposing the openness with the West, and this pushed the Iranian regime to remain closed. But we found also that when Ahmadinejad went to the General Assembly, stated that Iran has no problem with the people of the United States, and they were ready to resume their own relations. But when he returned to Iran, he was criticized by the political opponents, and he said that we are a nuclear power now and we have to cooperate. But in Iran there are some powers that do not like to see this change, and this proves that if if Ahmadinejad failed to open to the West, we have presented you an evidence saying that we have to reconcile our relations with the West, but there are some powers inside Iran who do not want that to happen. That's the words of Mr. Ahmadinejad. So we feel also that there are some secret negotiations held since March last year, and it is said that Ali Walayati, the foreign minister of the Iranian government during the 80s, that's why we refer to the significance of the Murshid's office. Ali met and even up starting from 2011, 2012, he held many meetings and secret meetings and with the superpowers. Why was it far away from Ahmadinejad? Why he didn't know about it? The answer lies in the historical legacy of the Murshid. And I changed the photo here, or the picture here. Ahmadinejad tried to compete with the faqih or the guide during this period, the period in 2005. He was, at the very beginning, he was completely obedient to the Murshid and to the guide, and he used also the religious discourse in his own statements. But in the year 2009, Ahmadinejad started to change his discourse and started to use the Persian nationality rather than the religious aspects. Does he have that nationalistic sense? No, we cannot say that. The pride of the Iranians is something deep-rooted in the Iranian personality, but Ahmadinejad started to use certain discourse, and sometimes he might go farther away and making a kind of a threat to the religious institution. What happened, for example, Ahmadinejad tried to remove the foreign minister and Ahmadinejad kept away from his own office for 11 days, causing a kind of a gap between Ahmadinejad and the Murshid. He started to talk about the nationalistic or patriotic statement, and even they were called the fitna trend, or the fitna or the division trend. They said that Ahmadinejad and his supporters created a new conservative trend without clergymen, and this was a kind of a direct threat to the religious and the Murshid circles. And what proves this is that the historic legacy of the Murshid and the refusal to find any competitor is that all the powers of the president or Rahim Shai or Rafsanjani to re-elect them or to re-nominate themselves as candidates for the presidency again, because they constitute a kind of threats. And there was also an article today in Al-Sharq Al-Awsat by Abdullah Muhajirani. If you'd like to see it, you can refer to the newspaper to go into the details. So what next? We said that there are sanctions, severe sanctions, and they had to deal with them, and therefore they started their own negotiations and the historic legacy, and that was dealt with. And what's next? Is there something hidden that made the Iranians delay their own negotiations with the Western powers? Was it the margin of movement? What do we mean by the margin of movement? Let's have a comparison between Ahmadinejad, Khatami, and Rouhani. Regarding the support of the Murshid, Khatami was not supported by the Murshid during his reign, and during the nuclear program was not that strong or advanced. And when we talk about Ahmadinejad, we say that Ahmadinejad was supported by the Murshid. Then he lost it, but Ahmadinejad also got a very strong nuclear program. That is February 2010, when the Iranian regime started to use the uranium by 20%, and when Hassan Rouhani, and up to this moment I say he is supported by the Murshid or the clear guide. Yes, a strong nuclear program. Yes, the Iranian program reached a 20% process, so that he even obliged the 5+1 to accept the facts and regarding the movement of 20 to 5% of the process of the use of nuclear power. This made the U.S. President Obama as if he is responding to the Israeli Prime Minister, saying that the dismemberment of the nuclear program in Iran is something unrealistic and something that belongs to an ideal world. That is, Iran had reached 20%, and here the economic sanctions forced the Iranian regime to take this change, and also the margin of movement helped them to negotiate, and also the historic legacy allowed them to start negotiations away from Ahmadinejad. Before the deal, what happened? We were trying to what Iran could provide or can present and the Western powers could provide. The major points that the two parties would not give up. We found for the Iranians that the Iranians would never give up their own nuclear program and the process of using that program by 20%. And for the Western powers is to make sure of the peaceful purposes of this program. If they agree on these 2 points, things will follow clearly, and the agreement was reached. Was it a kind of an agreement or an action plan? Is it a kind of a recognition of the Iranian right to have a nuclear program? The representative of the European Union's foreign policy, Mr. Ashton, said that we have reached an agreement to an action plan. Mr. Kerry, the U.S. Secretary of State, said that this agreement does not give any authority or recognition to the Iranians. And then Jawad Zarif, the Iranian foreign minister, said that we have reached an agreement and an action plan, and that in this agreement the Western powers had agreed and recognized our right to this nuclear program. Was Mr. Kerry right? Was Mr. Zarif right? I think that both of them were right. If you take Mr. Kerry's statement that there is no recognition for the Iranians because this was only a 6-month temporary agreement, and in case of the collapse of this agreement shall be considered null and void, and therefore anything in this agreement shall be considered null and void. And while Mr. Zarif said that it gave the Iranians the right to do so if Iran kept its own word and kept its own promise, we can say that Iran had reached an agreement to use the uranium in their own program. Has Iran realized its own long or mid-term objectives? Is it considered a kind of a success or concession in the short term? Let's see how the Iranian media dealt with this agreement and motivated it and provided it to the Iranian people to show that there is no concessions given by Iran. And let's be neutral and objective in dealing with this subject. Al-Alam TV after the agreement introduced on the 24th of November, saying that to suspend the process by 20%, saying that this is something voluntary and there is a huge stockpile and is very costly, and therefore there is no need to. So the suspension of this process is not a kind of concession. What is the output or the outcome is that Iran accepted the idea of using 5%, and they have the right to keep the process of using the uranium, and therefore the Iranian official Ali Salehi said if we want to raise it from 5% to 20%, we are capable of doing so within 24 hours. So the outcome here is that Iran has achieved its objective in this respect by keeping this cycle. Suspension of the Iraq nuclear reactor. They said that this reactor has not been launched. It's a matter of research, and the suspension is only a matter of 6 months, and the outcome is that it might be resumed, and there might be some restrictions on this reactor, but Iran will keep it in the future. In Iraq, it might move from heavy water to light water, but they might keep it also. As for the process of inspection, the Iranians say that it is voluntary and that the purpose is to build confidence and trust, and therefore they accepted the idea or the operations of the inspection, and will not have any negative impact on sovereignty. So the most important thing is, how do the Iranians read it, and how do the 5+1 powers read it? 5+1 will find that the inspection of a certain site is a nuclear site. Iran may say this is only a military site. For example, the Partin site, it is said that Iran has conducted some experiments there, and therefore the international inspectors wanted to visit this site, but Iran refused because it sees it as a military site and it's not a nuclear site, so that they will not be allowed to go there. And the outcome, the margin of movement and the difference in reading may constitute a problem in the future, but it could be negotiable, and especially that Iran started the process of purification and cleaning in that site. How about the horizons of the success of this deal? Are we going to see a continuity of the agreement, or are we going to see a collapse? When, for example, here the U.S. Undersecretary saying that Wendy Sherman saying that the complete agreement with Iran should require that Iran should dismantle its own stockpiles and infrastructures in this field. Mr. Zarif said any sanctions will consider or shall make this agreement null and void. What are the dimensions of this deal? We'll see here we have some opponents. Israel, which found that this agreement is a kind of a historic mistake. Second, the Congress, and we have also the fundamentalists in Iran who do not comply with the trends of Hassan Rouhani's government. The second problem is the entry into the details, the process of implementation, details, interpretation. Is there a kind of any agreement between Iran and the Western powers? If so, we could have seen during the last 8 years, for example, we could have seen such an agreement during these years, but in fact these may cast some shadows over this agreement. So is it a matter of a commitment, or is it a kind of an extension, or will it lead to a collapse? What do you expect? Some sanctions were imposed on Iran 2 weeks ago, and this of course made the Iranian experts stop their own negotiations in Geneva, and this led them to say something that would also affect the negotiations. Ali Larijani said, okay, he said that let them destroy this agreement and see what will happen. And then he said that this agreement was only a temporary station, and we have to be clever in dealing with them in order to realize the objectives of the Iranian nation in order to lift the sanctions on Iran. And we have seen he had taken an attitude, then he changed. Jawad Larijani said that the agreement is no longer dead, but it had deviated from its path, and we will continue, and we have the right to respond on the right time and the place. As for the Congress, there is a kind of a draft resolution to impose more sanctions on Iran, but with a grace period of 1 year, so that 5+1 and the United States and Iran will reach an agreement. So even the Congress said that they will impose these conditions or these sanctions with a grace period. Then the US president said that he will use the veto if the Congress imposes sanctions on Iran in rejecting these things. So these are indicators, are positive, and that the two parties try to keep this agreement. But this agreement will not move on a red carpet, but it will face some hurdles. So what we see here, we see that it's a kind of an obligation. What I mean by obligation, that the agreement imposes certain obligation for 6 months, and then at the very beginning that the two parties will be committed for 6 months, and then sanctions were imposed, giving us an indication that this might lead to a kind of collapsing. New statements were issued, and they were different in their own sharpness, giving us an indicator that this 6-month term might be extended, and the collapse of the agreement could be avoided by the two parties. And the news point out that there is a slow progress in the negotiations, and that this slow progress in the negotiation may lead to an extension, especially that if we know that there is an item saying that this period is extendable from 6 months to 1 year, and this means that this agreement might be extended. And how about the openness of the Iranians to the Gulf countries? What do we need to read the Iranian attitudes in this field? In fact, from my own point of view, there might be other things we might need. Two important factors or things. So we have to know first who is coming from Iran, what's coming from Iran, and second, the gap in interpretation between Iran and the GCC states. When we ask, for example, who is coming from Iran, after seeing the galaxy of the Iranian system, we might say the Iranian regime is coming or the Iranian government is coming. Is this important for us? Let's see the nuclear deal, and then we project it on the Iranian to the Gulf countries. In Iran, all of them, system and government, went to the negotiations with 5+1. Statements of the Murshid, statements of the Revolution Guard, from the executive power and from the parliament and other institutions. Even the Revolutionary Guards issued some critical points of view, but the general atmosphere showed or suggested that this galaxy was stable and agreed on one solution, and all these institutions agreed on one attitude regarding the nuclear deal. However, there are some skirmishes, especially by certain powers, that gave some concessions to the West, and so on and so forth. So when we project this to the openness to the Gulf nations, first of all, there is a kind of discrepancy between Hassan Rouhani's and Ahmadinejad's policies, and his policy was that showing an international attitude, and he used to talk to those superpowers and the West. And during Najad's era, he concentrated on the African nations, Latin America, and some countries that take anti-Western attitudes. But Rouhani, however, I do not say that Ahmadinejad did not take positive attitudes, but they were very rare. Hassan Rouhani, from the very beginning, has shown this openness to the Gulf nations, and when we compare between the two, yes, we can say that there is a difference between the two men. However, let's reflect this on our own situation. In fact, we haven't seen any clear attitudes by Murshid, by the Revolutionary Guard, or the Parliament, or the executive powers. On the contrary, there are different attitudes and different statements. Why is it so important? Because the executive power in Iran will present its soft policy and positive attitudes, and then will enter into the galaxy of the system and will collide with the other institutions that would reject all these policies. So when we face such a problem, in fact, that when we say that the Iranian regime is coming, we'll find that some statements were issued by some influential powers inside the system. Does this mean that we should ignore the other statements? No, on the contrary, the policies of the GCC states are welcoming, especially if Iran opens its own arms to achieve stability in the region. But any reader of the Iranian politics will understand that there must be a kind of a support to this foreign policy in order to give it more reliability. What do we mean by this gap of reading when we say there is a kind of intervention? There is, yes, the Iranians intervene within or in the internal affairs of GCC states, and this is a flagrant violation of the diplomatic relations and also will affect stability in the region. On the other hand, it is not considered as intervention because Iran thinks that it is the supporter of the Shia minority in some Arab countries, as if Iran is the godfather of the Shiites, and unfortunately you'll find this discrepancy in the Iranian foreign policy. While they respect borders and the states and sovereignty, you will find within the principles of the foreign policy they should support what is called the mustadafin, or the dispossessed classes, and this of course will cause a kind of contradictions. When we talk about the 3 occupied islands of the United Arab Emirates, there is no discrepancy in reading that it is a kind of occupation, whatever the form it takes. When the Iranians say that there is a kind of misunderstanding and they consider that Abu Musa is only occupied island, this is a kind of discrepancy and hypocrisy in this attitude. And when you see the openness of the Iranian regime, and also the visit paid by His Highness Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed, and then the visit by Mr. Zarif to the UAE, are very important steps, and we accept this visit and we consider it as good signs, but our islands are occupied. It's not a matter of misunderstanding as the Iranians may understand it, and also limiting it to Abu Musa only, but they are Abu Musa and Tomb al-Kubra and Tomb al-Sughra, or Grand Tomb and Small Tomb. So this matter requires a review in order to reach a certain agreement. When we talk about the Syrian crisis, do we consider it as a revolution? Are there some terrorist groups there? Yes, there are. Whether we agree with Iran or not, whether Iran and the Gulf nations and the whole world agree that there are some terrorist, dangerous organizations. But when the Iranian regime talks about the revolution in Syria is a revolution led by some terrorist groups, and when the Iranians host certain opposition forces and consider them as the real opposition, here we find the problem, because the most critical matter here is the idea of takfiri or fundamentalist, as the Iranians use takfiri, or those terrorist groups are described in a certain way by the Iranians, because this will include the revolutionaries in Syria, putting them under one title, takfiris, that is those people who consider other Muslims are infidels. And this term is repeated, and even the Western media started to accept this idea and reproduce it. And when we talk about takfiris, no doubt there are some terrorist groups, but we cannot put all the Iranian opposition under this title. This is the difference in the reading between the Gulf nations and Iran, and this requires a kind of certain approaches to deal with it. And the last part, we talk about Iran and the United States. Let's see what history says. In order to be fair, of course, interest is the main motive in the international relations. Politics and international relations say that there is no permanent friend and no permanent enemy or foe. When there is a kind of closeness between the US and Iran, it is their own public interest that push the two sides to come closer to each other. I cannot criticize the United States or Iran or any other nation. We talk about something clear-cut. Nations are motivated by their own interests, and if something happens, it is the interest that pushed this side or that side to enter into that deal. What does history tell us? Iran-Contra? During the revolutionary period of the 80s, death to America, and the superpowers tried to import weapons from the United States, and this led to a scandal which was known as Contra crisis, and both nations tried to find a kind of cooperation in Afghanistan, and the United States found itself obliged to cooperate with Iran in Iraq, and there are very different statements proving the same. The secret negotiations that took place in March and even before that, and the hidden things may be greater, and this will reiterate that the public interest or the interest of these nations will be the major motivator here and incentive, and in general all nations follow their own interests to realize their own objectives. This interest, Margibar America or death to America, might be changed from the focal point of their own policy as a religious attitude. Khomeini stressed while he was alive. One of the preachers said that this is not a verse from the Quran to be repeated always. No, we can change it finally. Whoever was the president, whether Mohammed Khatami or Rafsanjani or Hassan Rouhani or Ahmadinejad, the galaxy will be there, and all its institutions will try to read the internal, regional, international situation in order to reach an important point, that is to realize the objectives of the regime and to keep its own existence. Mohammed Jawad Larjani, the brother of Sadiq Larjani, the Chief Justice, and also the chairman of the Legislative Council. He was the Undersecretary of Foreign Affairs, and he talked about the policy of al-Qura as Iran is the leader of the Islamic world. What did he say? He said that in order to maintain our own and protect our interests, we are ready to enter into dialogue with Satan, even in the bottom of Jahannam, in the bottom of hell. Thank you very much for your attention.
شكرا دكتور سلطان على ما طرحته من أفكار.
Thank you, Dr. Sultan, for your ideas. You gave us a very clear picture about the factors that led to the change in the Iranian foreign policy, and you explained the situation or the difference between the regime and the government, and you dealt with the factors that should be taken into account in reading the Iranian openness, specifically by the GCC states. Now we'll open the floor for your own discussions and questions, and for 25 minutes, Doctor.
لا موجود. لا الميكروفون موجود يا دكتور.
بسم الله الرحمن.
In the name of Allah, We thank the Emirates Center for holding such activities that in fact educate us and raise levels of awareness about regional and international affairs, and congratulate you for holding such lectures. And I have just arrived from the airport and I came to listen to a young and promising researcher, and I congratulate you for your own knowledge and your own deep knowledge on Iran, and also I thank you for your own modesty. You're only a researcher. If others could have written an expert, but you wrote only a researcher in Iranian politics. And others could have used you. All the TV channels in the region could have used you, especially that Iran became a very hot potato these days. And in fact, you are a promising researcher. Wishing you all the best. Thank you. The other point, Iran is our own neighbor. Willy-nilly, they are bad, good, they are our neighbors, and we have to deal with them. Sometimes you might be forced to leave your house if your neighbor is bad, but with Iran the matter is different, and therefore it is very important. And you are a good researcher, and there are many research centers in the Arab world and the Gulf and international also research centers and teaching Arabic, for example, in Iran. We have only one or two. One in Egypt, I think, and the other one is here. So we need to have such research centers, and we, when we talk about, through my modest experience about Iran, there are three major institutions in Iran that could not be ignored in any decision making, whether internal, external, international. First of all is the religious or the clergy institution. Since 1979 up to this moment, it is the pivotal institution. It is an institution which says yes or no. Leave all these margins, but in the strategic decisions, yes, the clerical institution is the decision maker. The second point is the state institutions. Iran willy-nilly has its own body politic. They have three separate institutions, but eventually, by the end of the day, decisions are made according to these negotiations among the three powers. And then they have civil society. Yes, the bazaar, the market, and the other NGOs are very important. And the bazaar is now damaged by the sanctions, by the unemployment, by the other the bazaar and others look at the other side of the Gulf, and they see the progress and the development we have made, and they compare themselves, although they are oil producing also, and they have other wealths, but they cannot use it. So these three organizations cannot be ignored. And the most important organization is the Revolutionary Guard. The Revolutionary Guard are the protectors of the revolution, and they were created for this purpose during the Iraq-Iran war, you remember. Now, we come to this side of the Gulf now. The Iranian Western nuclear deal came as part of our own call also, because without reaching that agreement we could have reached a kind of a crisis or a confrontation. And I think that if the agreement would be, if it is for the Iranians, it is also for our own side. It is for our own advantage. Is there any secret agreement? Yes, it is still a draft agreement. It might hold, it might fail, but eventually any independent state, whether Iran or any other nation must have something on the counter, something under the counter. And this is not a secret, of course, to know that Iran has its own different identity. Dealing with the Iranians is completely different from dealing with any other nationality, especially in the Gulf region. If you go, for example, to any grocery, for example, one owned by Indian, the other one owned by Iranian. See the treatment. You cannot cheat that Iranian. If he doesn't cheat you, he thinks that he has cheated you. So it is necessary to understand the institutions. It is necessary to understand the Iranian politics, and the matter requires a kind of reconciliation. The invitation for peaceful talks through lectures and agreements and things. Thank you very much for your efforts and I'm sure that you'll have a bright future. Thank you. I hope that the commentators will be very brief, please. Please. Your questions and comments. Please, Doctor. Dr. Ibtisam, you haven't arrived from the airport, have you? No, Dr. Abdurrada, I must respond to him. I congratulate myself and even before I congratulate Dr. Sultan and the Emirates for having a distinguished researcher and in a very important field where we have a rarity in the Gulf region and the Arab world, and I enjoyed your own presentation and the interesting points raised. I have some notes here that would not mitigate the significance of your own presentations. In your question, who rules Iran? In fact, the ruler of Iran is not the wali al-faqih or the cleric guide. It is the coalition of the leader, the wali al-faqih and the Revolutionary Guard of Iran. During the Khomeini's era, the Revolutionary Guard was assigned with the task of defending Iran. They were not involved with the internal affairs of Iran. After the death of Khomeini and the rise of Khatami and the reform trend that created a kind of terror, a kind of horror for the conservatives, leading to a kind of coalition between the Revolutionary Guard and Khamenei as the guide or the marja or the authority of all other institutions. And in fact, this led to some sort of criticisms at that time. But why Rouhani came to power? Rouhani represents a reforming trend. Neither Khamenei nor the guards wanted him to be there. Why did they accept him as a president? In fact, Rouhani is now considered as the representative of the minimum level of political weight, of the revolutionary discourse, and the minimum level of popular representation. Even the percentage was not very high. The percentage, why? Because there was a kind of why Najad was criticized always, because Najad during his second term wanted to rebel against the faqih or the guide and the Revolutionary Guard, and therefore he should have been silenced, and he wanted to put them aside. Because why Rouhani was chosen? By the way, Hassan Rouhani is the theorist of the nuclear program, and if you see the smile, Mr. Sultan, if you see it, I think this is the soft power of the Iranians. But this doesn't mean that there is no extremism, because Rouhani was selected because the sanctions were very severe. I attended a conference, international conference, and even before the Iranian presidential elections, and one of the Iranians, an expert, said that Najad wanted to reach an agreement with the West, but the House of the Leader coalition did not give him the chance to win this prize. And this coalition also wanted to reach this agreement, but Najad was their own opponent, and therefore the matter was engineered in a way so that Hassan Rouhani would win, because Iran was under severe sanctions and there was a kind of a crisis of legitimacy within the Iranian regime because of the sanctions. This clarifies to us the point of who rules Iran. And now, if we come to this agreement, I might disagree with my brother and my colleague, Dr. Abdurrada. I say that Iran is still a danger, whether a neighbor or not. It's still an ideological danger, and also a regional danger, security size. If the Iranians cover their teeth, this doesn't mean that they don't have teeth here, but the reflections of this agreement should be our own consideration. Iran should not be given the chance to be the leading and strongest power in the Gulf. Iran should be prevented from intervening in the internal affairs of Saudi Arabia or Bahrain or other nations, and Iran should not be given the chance to take the Arab Shiites to their side. The Shia Arabs are UAE and GCC nationals. Their own sectarian belonging doesn't mean that they are Iranians, and if these things are not clear in our own relations with Iran, this agreement will be meaningless for the GCC nations. Yes, this is a deterrent force, and Iran will not use it, of course. Thank you, Doctor. Please try to be brief. New questions and comments. Doctor came from a conference, and Dr. Abdullah came from also a long trip, so I hope there will be no long comments. Thank you, Dr. Sultan. My question about the Gulf coalition or union, sorry, and the Gulf Iranian Omani relations. Was there any Iranian role in the decision of the failure of the Gulf Union? What is the role of Iran in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia? Was it behind this decision? Would you like to take the three questions together? I'll give you the chance. I'll give you the chance to ask a question. Yes, I'll give you the chance to comment. Please, Doctor, try to respond. Dr. Abdurrada, thank you very much for your compliments, and I hope I'll be a promising researcher, and I agree with you that there is a triangle in Iran which is very important. That is the religious or institution, the bazaar, and the Revolutionary Guard. This is well known, and when the bazaar or the market is affected, the religious institution shall be affected, because the khums or the poor alms taken by the institution, religious institution, shall be affected, because this is a very important triangle, and these are the main sides. The other institutions complete the picture only. Dr. Ibtisam, as regards the house of the Wali al-Faqih or the Rida, I have read it and heard it, but I am sorry to say that I'm specialized in this field when we talk about the Wali al-Faqih or the guide or the clerk guide, including the Revolutionary Guard and the leader himself, and this means that the leaders of the guards shall remain as they were, and the guards will be the instruments in the hand of the Iranian regime in general. Do the Revolutionary Guards have their own strong powers? Are they still influential? Yes, they are influential, but will they have the power to influence the murshid or the guide? No, the guide can remove all the leaders of the Revolutionary Guards, so we cannot say that this house or this coalition will include them. No, the Revolutionary Guard is very important in the system, but I agree with you on the point that the powers or the authorities of the Revolutionary Guards gave us the impression that there is a kind of closeness or strategic relations with Ahmadinejad. Ahmadinejad was a source of danger when he started to talk about Iranian nationalism. No, that was a source of pride for the Iranians that they have the right to do so, but that constituted a kind of a threat to the religious or the clerical institution. And as for the comparison between the Iranian school and the Iranian school, are there secret things in the deal? We hope that these secret matters will be positively reflected. Would Iran constitute a danger from another side? Is Iran, or does Iran have some strategies and some interest in the region? Of course, yes, they do. Do these interests might lead, or do they lead to a kind of intervention? Yes. And we try to reach a kind of reconciliation, kind of stability and peace in the region. And here we have to come in and to make a kind of a balance between our own interests and their own interests. And we have to study the relations between America and the Iranians and force the others to respect our own interests in a friendly, amicable, diplomatic way that would enhance stability in the region. The other question regarding the Gulf Union, after the statement of the Omani foreign minister, many people expected the worst, and there were many people who were thinking of that, of the collapse of the GCC, but the summit of the GCC held in Kuwait very recently issued its own statement, even if it did not refer to the idea of the union. What would we come out of these meetings in the GCC Cooperation Council Summit? Some people said that this might lead to a crack. No, there was no crack. There were decisions that would lead to enhance our own cooperation. Whether cooperation or union, I think we are a coherent group. But the other side that might cause this crack, whatever that side was, we would tell them that if eventually the common grounds are stronger than our own differences. Yeah, it might be, there might be relations between this state and Iran, but let it be. Let it be. Will it affect our own coherence? I think we are a coherent group, whether it was called GCC Cooperation Council or Union. And this will enhance our own position as a GCC state and will be a strong firewall against the ambitions of others to create a crack. And Dr. Ibtisam, she says, the Arab Shias, the Sunnis, no, we are not talking about Shias or Sunnis. No, I do not agree with that. Those who would like to talk about sectarianism and that there are Shia Muslims and there are depressed people, we say, very short, we, the people of the Gulf, do not have that sectarian gap in our own belonging. We belong to our own nations, and this national spirit will put us all under this umbrella, and those who do not come under this umbrella will not be considered as even considered. Even the Sunnis themselves used or employed political Islam and therefore they will be considered as outlaws or outcasts, whether Shias or Sunnis, and we have to deal with them in a way that would bring them back to the path. And we don't deal with sectarianism. We in the Arab Gulf nations. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your responses, Dr. Sultan. Please try to be brief. Please introduce yourself, please. Thank you. Introduce yourself, please. Your name? Dr. Mahdi Ali, an employee of an Iranian institution here. Thank you, Dr. Sultan Mohammed Al-Naeimi, for his valuable presentation. I'm sorry, my Arabic is weak a little bit because, yes, it is weak a little bit. I thank you, Dr. Sultan Al-Naeimi, for your own presentation, though in my mind, I think that there are different mistakes he had come. For example, who rules Iran? He asked the question. In fact, the answer is that the people of Iran rule themselves through the Wilayat al-Faqih and the legal institutions of the state. Second, the Iranian Gulf or Arab Gulf states closeness is a relation based on governmental. Popular closeness is not only governmental relation, as he said that the system and some of its organizations might have some trends while the government has its own trends to be closer to the Iranians. I, as Iranian, I know, I see also in all the organizations and the institutions, whether the Wilayat al-Faqih or the other organizations, I feel that there is a realistic trend to good neighborhood and to have good relations with the Gulf nations. And the speaker said also that Iran intervenes flagrantly with the internal affairs. This is an accusation, and you have to present your own proof. You have to present your evidence. And it's true that the Iranian institutions support Shiism as a school, and there are two different concepts. There are two different concepts, Shia and Shiism. We are not intervening with the internal affairs of the Gulf nations, and by accusing us that we are supporting the Shia minority. We see Islam as a realistic school, including all sects. Sunnis or Shias are their brothers, although in Iran we have the trends to support Shiism as a school of thought, and not as the supporter, or not to support the members of that sect, whether in Bahrain or others. But we call upon all the Bahrainians, whether Sunnis or Shias, we don't have any different, although we in Iran support Shiism as a school of thought, and we say that Shiism is closer to Mohammedan Islam as to the Sunnah. That's the point of view. And the Iranian closeness between the Iranians and the Gulf nations is essential and not a matter of governmental, but we say that this is also popular. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Dr. Mahdi, please. You have presented many points. Do you have a specific question, please? Do you have a specific question? Otherwise, we'll give the chance to others. Thank you, thank you. Once again, I'm not going to take all questions. 3 questions only. I'll take you randomly. Be brief, please. I'm not going to choose people from the ECSSR. There. Yes. That person who raises his hand with the pen. My name is Salman Dosari, a writer from Saudi Arabia. Thank you, Dr. Sultan, for giving us some clear points. My question, after each elections, presidential elections in Iran, the Iranian officials ask the Gulf nations to open a new page with the continuity of the Iranian occupation of the islands and their intervention in Saudi Arabia and support of the Houthis and the support of the Syrian regime against the revolution in Syria. Do the Gulf nations have to present their own right cheek or left cheek after giving the right cheek? What do you think? Assalamu alaikum, Khalid Khalifa. My question to Dr. Sultan, I agree with you that those who rule Iran are the murshids. Who is leading the general murshid or the general guide of Iran? Last question. This is the golden question. Be brief, please. Introduce yourself, please. Thank you for this interesting lecture. But as a follower or an observer of the Iranian situation, I was more puzzled. And if the Congress and the White House say that they are also puzzled between Ahmadinejad and Rouhani, this situation is still valid and this puzzlement is still there. Do they have one goal and they differ in instruments or what? What I want to say here, does Iran have the readiness to give up its own nuclear program for having a regional role in which it becomes the dominant force in the region? That's what we see. Iran seeks to achieve two objectives in the region. That is to control the Hormuz Strait and the Bab el-Mandab in Yemen. Has Iran replaced its own nuclear program by this huge objective? I'll give now the floor to Dr. Sultan to respond to these questions, but in 2 minutes, please. Dr. Mahdi Ali, your presence among us is an evidence that the Gulf nations welcome this openness, and that this is also a proof that if Iran makes one step, we will make 2 steps forward, and your presence asking us and even receiving your questions in a positive spirit is the ground that will make us reach common grounds. When you said that the people of Iran rule, yes, I do not underscore or undermine the role of the Iranian nation. I do respect your own deep civilization, and we have common ties between us and the Iranian nation or the Iranian people. Please do not misunderstand my lecture that I do not like the Iranian people, and I repeat it here. We welcome and we love or we like the Iranian people and the Iranian regime itself if they have that positive attitude towards peace and stability. You said also that there is a kind of closeness in your own relations, and that your own approach is not governmental, but it is the system itself or the regime. I personally say I wish it could happen, and I hope that we'll see in the near future that we hear, for example, statements from the Murshid or other institutions confirming and underscoring this point, because it will be very positive, and we hope we could see it again, and we don't say that the Iranians do not like it. As we said in the nuclear program, we would like to see it to be applied on our own good neighborhood, and we said that Iran sees Al-Bahrain as something without difference between Shias Shiaism and Sunnism. Let me ask you a question. You said that we have common grounds and more than our own differences. Why did he not visit Bahrain when he visited the UAE and other nations? Why didn't he take a decision to visit Iran, for example, to contribute to the stability of the country? I'm not going to talk about this point, whether Iran is intervening or not, but everybody can point out these facts and let's see this light at the end of the tunnel. Let him visit the Kingdom of Bahrain so that this will confirm the Iranian policy towards the Gulf, and we will welcome them all. And the visit of His Highness Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed to Iran was an indicator of this attitude. Even those who said that the Saudis were conservative or reserved about it, but the Gulf Summit in Kuwait reiterated our own attitude towards Iran and the openness towards them. As for Mr. Salman Dosari, do we have to open a new page? Yes, the problem lies in the presence of gaps in our own interpretation of the attitudes between us. When we talk about occupation, they say, for example, it's called misunderstanding. When we talk about flagrant violations and intervention, they say, no, this is not. And there are certain landmarks that could be pointed to, and let them prove it to us, and let them prove these things. Even the visit of Mr. Zarif to Bahrain could have been more positive if he had done it. And my concern is that during Mohammed Khatami's concerns were there and will have their own shadows to ask the question whether the Iranians are serious or not. But let's take the positive side, and we'll see whether the Iranian regime is really positive. And as Mr. Mahdi said, let's see their own statements and see these statements or words changing into deeds, and to see the common grounds more than differences. As for the who rules Iran or who leads Iran, you agree with me that I didn't say that the mufti or the faqih or the guide is the only leader, but the system or the galaxy is centered around that guide. Who helps the mufti or the faqih or the guide? Yes, the institutions that will support him in that galaxy, you know him. And the last question, do they have one objective, Nahyan and Rouhani? Those who study the Iranian system will have one objective: to be influential regional power, but shall not be made at the cost of the Gulf nations. I don't want to refer to this point that Iran will be the Gulf police. No, or the era of the Gulf police at that time should not be reprocessed. Were we in the same position? Was Iran during the Shah's regime was the same as it is now? No, of course. Does Iran have the desire to replace its own nuclear program with another role? They have the right to have a peaceful nuclear reactors, but my own freedom stands at the freedom or the borders of the freedom of others. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Sultan Al-Naeimi, for this lecture, interesting lecture in which you presented so many things, and there are many other points to be raised by the two sides, the Gulf nations and the Iranians, and we agree with Dr. Abdurrahman, who said Iran is our neighbor. You cannot leave the area because you don't like them or they don't like you, and of course you have to show the good intentions on the two sides, especially that the Gulf nations open their arms and extend their hands to the Iranians to achieve stability in the region. With this, we come to the end of this year, 2013, and avail myself of this opportunity to invite you to attend our own activities in 2014. We'll start with a lecture on the 8th of January by Dr. Mohammed, the Nobel Prize winner. You are all invited to attend this lecture. Now it gives me the pleasure to extend my gratitude to the participants for their interactivity and for their rich contributions to this lecture. Wishing you all the best and see you very soon, and Happy New Year. Assalamu alaikum.